Hello and welcome to NARC Live on Wednesday the 10th of May 2023, coming to you live from Norfolk on the east coast of England with Tammy M0TC.
Hello.
And me, Davey G3YLA. Lovely to see you. On tonight's show, we find out about Propquest, the fantastic online propagation tool with Jim, G3YLA. Lots of NARC weekend activities coming soon. And we find out what on earth this really is. Good to be back with you. And we start with club news. And the weekend after this coming one, the 20th and 21st of May, you've probably seen it on the newsletters, we've got our VHF contest station led by Phil, G3YLA. It's the first time that NARC has really done a serious VHF entry for many, many years, as many years as I think I can remember. We're going to set up on the Friday afternoon, but as I said, the main days are the Saturday and the Sunday, the 20th and 21st of May. We've got quite a few people committed now, about 19 I think in our group, but we would love people to be able to not just work us on there, but come and see us if they'd like to. And if you'd like to get more involved, helping us set up, helping us pack up, that would be welcome as well. So you can either contact me in the usual way or contact Phil G4LPP, and we'd love to see you there. Also then, coming up just 2 weeks after that, on the weekend of the 3rd and 4th of June, it's Radioactive. It's back, it's number 14, and we're really looking forward to a fantastic weekend of radio, which it encourages as well, not just hardened radio amateurs, but their families, their friends, their children, whatever, anybody to come and see what radio is all about. Because of course we have the National Field Day station, which is CW. We also have a 6-metre station running SSB voice, so pretty much anybody can get involved with those. But also we've got lots of other things happening as well. We've got workshops and demonstrations. We've got a radioactive raffle. Tammy and I cook a Sunday roast, various different types of roast meats and things, and vegetarian alternatives as well in roast rolls for the Sunday. And of course, if you've got any ideas or any requests for things that you would like to see, we've had several ideas now given to us. Thank you for those who have supported us. Then please contact us. We also hope to show the demo of Geochron. Normally as well, I also arrange a special purchase of various items like good quality tools, test equipment, soldering irons, that sort of thing. So you'll be able to order these about 10 days or so before them. In fact, I'm going to just show you a preview of one item. I normally try and find a sort of star buy, don't I? You know, because it's cheap. That's what you say to me. Yeah, thank you, Tammy. This is an idea of something I have found, which we're going to offer. It's not the highest quality, it's not a Fluke or an Avo quality, but if you could show on one, Tammy. This is a little handheld multimeter, which I know won't surprise many of you, and it just does the usual sorts of things. But it's also got a really nice little extra feature. So underneath, if you have a look there, you've got 2 Cat 5 sockets, the sort of thing you use for all your networks at home. And in fact, this little module here, if I could do it, never do things live, they say. Oh dear. See, it's so easy. I did this no problem earlier. Right, here we go. So I've taken this little bit out, you see. And what this enables you to do is test network plugs. Because, of course, it isn't just networks as well that uses these modular plugs now, the RJ45. It's a lot of microphones have them now for rigs and things like that. But this is a really nice little feature. And if I select the auto range on this meter, I've got this as a standard network cable. But imagine this is one end of your house. And the other end of the cable is in a socket in your wall, and you've got a problem with your network. You just plug this in the other end, and it allows you to test it. And if you can see, it goes through all of the numbers, all the different pin numbers, and you can check it. Anyway, this is going to come in at under £5. It does. I just sound like a market trader now, don't I?
Yeah.
Anyway, this is to give you an idea. This is something that I've sourced, and it's going to be probably £4.50, something like that. So that's the sort of thing. So have a look. On the club newsletter a week or so before, about 10 days or so before Radioactive, there'll be a full programme. You'll be able to reserve your free Sunday lunch rolls. It will tell you all that we're doing on every day, what times and everything to turn up. It's all happening here at Great Ellingham, which is near Attleborough in Norfolk, and it's free to all NARC members, to their families and friends. We would love you to get involved. Lots happening that weekend, so just look out for details, as I said. Enough of a plug, I think, for that.
Yeah.
Coming back to more current things then, this Saturday it's our regular monthly sked to Koblenz, and that's on 7.123 megahertz.
You missed something.
Did I?
Yeah.
Oh, I did, sorry. You see, we have a script and a running order for a reason. And I'm looking at the wrong camera as well. And I should really read what I've typed, shouldn't I? Yes, we do. Before that, there's 3 things happening over the next few weeks. And the other thing that's happening, mustn't forget this, it's our annual radio rally, which is called Barford. It's at Barford Village Hall. Private and commercial traders are welcome. There's a bring and buy stand. There'll be a club stand as well. There'll be a CW stand. There'll be repeater groups there. And of course, lots of people selling, both private and commercial sellers selling bits and pieces that they've got. There'll be a charity raffle. Entrance is £2.50. Under 16s are free. And we've kept the pitches and the indoor tables the same. So the pitches outside are £8 each. You can have as big a pitch virtually as you want. Indoor tables in the village hall are £10 each. There's only a few of those, so you will need to reserve those, but you don't need to tell me if you want to reserve a regular outdoor pitch. So we hope for good weather, and our guest later on I think could well be influential in maybe that, hopefully. They say they're not influential, but I think they are. And we look forward to Barford, which is on the 2nd of July, Sunday the 2nd of July. Now I can tell you about what's happening this Saturday, because we've got our Koblenz sked. It's our regular monthly sked with our twin city.
You missed something.
What?
You're going to recap all of them.
Okay, I'll recap. You see, why do I write a script and why do we work with all these slides? Okay. This is what happens when you miss several weeks, you see. You get out of a pattern. All right, so pretend you haven't seen that. We'll edit this out and we'll say... So let's just have a look at what we've got coming up over the next few weekends. Cue. There we are. Saturday the 20th and 21st of May, we have a VHF field day. It's actually not a VHF field day, it's a VHF contest day at Great Ellingham. Saturday the 3rd and 4th of June and Sunday the 4th of June, it's radioactive and national field day again here at Great Ellingham. And then on Sunday the 2nd of July, the first Sunday of July as usual, it's open to the public between 9 and 1. It's the Barford Radio Rally. If you're a trader, you'll be able to arrive from 8 o'clock in the morning. Is that okay?
Yeah, 3rd time lucky for Koblenz now.
Maybe I should have an auto cue after all. Anyway, so this Saturday, it really is Koblenz. It's a sked with our twin city of Koblenz. Here we are. It's on 7.123 megahertz, starts at 10 a.m. and of course everybody is very welcome. We pray for good conditions so that we can have a good sked with our friends in Germany. Also telling you a few other things that are happening. This Monday, May the 15th, we've got another Tonight at 8 webinar, which Tammy and I host for the RSGB. And this month really might interest you because it's a talk by Jack Purdom, W8TEE, and Al Peter, AC8GY, who collaborated to build the T41 EP, which is a 7-band, 20-watt CW SSB STR transceiver. And this presentation is chiefly about how they developed the high-performance CW decoder part of it. So really good night if you like making stuff and you're interested in STRs and modern technology, the sort of thing you can make at home. Have a look at that. The details are on there. Basically, you can either find it on the RSGB's YouTube channel or go to rsgb.org/webinars at 8 o'clock on Monday, and you'll be able to watch it live and ask questions of them and everything else. Now we come to members news, and we've got quite a bit because we haven't been with you for a few weeks. So a few weekends ago, we had our International Marconi Day station at Caister, and this inspired Merv, MI0TMW, to send us this picture, which he found online and shows a rather interesting antenna. Look at it, virtually centre of that picture there. Now that looks like a sleepy little Caister of many, many years ago. But that is quite some antenna. I don't know if anybody's got any idea what that is. Merv thinks it would be interesting to us. Couldn't be a Marconi station then, surely. But that's very high, very tall. Probably a little bit more unusual. And also, you can see guy ropes. I don't know if you can see this at home, but we can also see there are guy ropes on that picture as well. Anyway, if you've got any information, you've got any idea of what that picture's about and what that antenna was, it'd be lovely to hear from you. And this will be news as well, good news for radio amateurs. Most radio amateurs like a beer occasionally, don't they? Bit and DX Group are running a station for pubs and clubs on the air. I've never heard of that before. From the Erpingham Eagle Pub this weekend, the 13th and 14th of May. And they're inviting NARC members to work them on the air, but also visit them. How about that? An invitation to visit the manufacturer. No mention of whether they're going to buy the round. I don't know. But anyway, they're operating it between 10 and 4 both days, and they'll hope to be on HF, VHF, and data modes as well. So hopefully you'll be able to work them. Thanks for the invitation, guys. Now, being spring, Bob G6PWS has sent us a couple of wonderful wildlife videos. The first one, if we can see this, Tammy, and I'll just mention what he said about it. He was just walking home when he saw this young fox just standing there. And he got his phone out and started, and it was still standing there. That's amazingly tame, isn't it?
It is, yeah. Definitely.
And the second video is this. And this is a sparrowhawk which landed in his garden to eat his or her catch. It is about that time, isn't it? Remember when we used to do Spring Watch when we were all locked up and couldn't go anywhere? Must be about 3 years we've been doing this now. Anyway, it's a lovely, lovely video. Thank you very much, Bob, for sharing that with us. Again, pretty tame, I would think, unless Bob had a very long-range lens.
Fairly
Lovely.
long, I would think. Yeah.
That's brilliant. And also, still on a nature theme, you remember James M0 UKS and Lynn? They've got more cameras than the BBC in their back garden, I think. Well, he sent us some wonderful pictures. These ones, I'll see if I've got these in the right order. This is, he said that their great tit, Sid.
This is blue.
Oh, okay. The blue tit has 9 eggs in its nest. There we go.
Yeah.
But didn't finish laying until about the 1st of May. So hopefully hatching any day soon, he says. But Sid, who is the great tit, hatched 4 babies on the 7th of May.
Oh, lovely.
That
Sid
is
the
fantastic.
squatter.
James sits like that when he's having his tea, doesn't he? Waiting for Lynn to fit. Anyway, better not say that. Anyway, thank you very much for all those lovely pictures. And finally, from members' news, and it really is great. Thank you very much, all of you who responded to the call to send us stuff. Steve, G3YLA, has found another bargain product that he wants to tell us about. And he sent us this review. So here we are.
Well, I went to Lidl's to buy some food earlier this week. And unfortunately, I accidentally bought one of these. A new soldering iron from Lidl's. This is the Parkside cordless soldering iron, PLKA 4B3, still available at the moment. It's got a heat up time of 30 seconds. It's around about 8 watts. It has a temperature of about 470 degrees, so it's ideal for printed circuit board type stuff, but obviously not for heavy duty things. That's not its purpose at all, really. It's also got a 3-year guarantee, I've just noticed as well. So the battery inside, I believe it'll probably be something like an 18650 by the look of things. But let's have a look inside the box and see what we've got. Right, this is the soldering iron. Now, it has a bit on the end here, and the screw is pretty much like an old bicycle lamp. So I expect if you put a bicycle lamp or a torch lamp in there, you could probably get a torch out of it. The off-on switch is there. There's an indicator here which glows red when you first switch it on, and after the 30 seconds it will glow green. I would think that's probably on a timer rather than actually reading the temperature, because there's only 2 connections on this for the element. There's nothing to sense the heat. So that's your iron. Nice little size, it fits well in the hand, and the charging system is USB-C, and you get a charging lead with it which has USB-C at one end and USB-A at the other end. You need to provide your own charging wall outlet, because it doesn't come with that. It does come, however, with some solder, which is high temperature solder, so that can be chucked, lead free. Not very good for doing repairs with. You put too much heat into the component, it'll eventually destroy the component. This is the stand that comes with it, and it also comes with a dehydrated piece of sponge. You have to add your own water to that, and it can be either hot or cold water, whichever you've got on tap, as they say. And I've put mine in a little plastic bag so that the water doesn't escape and run away. There's an instruction leaflet which is in English and German, Chinese and several other different languages. So let's have a look at the iron. Right, so you hold this button for about 10 seconds and you'll see the red LED come on, and also the work light, which is down here. There are two white LEDs with a little bit of plastic between the two to make a little light. So if we hold that for about 10 seconds, it will come on. There it is. So that's your light. So we'll watch this, and I think it will take about 30 seconds. Although there already is heat there, as you can see, it's smoking already. Not enough to melt. There we go. It's enough to melt the solder now. So that's already up to temperature, but the LED hasn't changed to green now. So that's your iron. Works really well. Very good, as I said, for like PCB type stuff, small repairs, but not any good at all for joints where you need a lot of heat. You need a different iron for that. I think the forte of this type of iron, let's just shake that off there. The forte of this type of iron is when you're out and about and you don't have the mains power close to hand. So that's ideal for putting in your toolbox. I'll tell you what we'll do while we're at it. We'll just take the bit out, which I will do with a pair of pliers because it is a bit warm. Put that in there. So let's get a drill screwdriver and take it apart and see what's inside. I suspect it's probably an 18650 battery in here by the look of the length of the thing, which are readily available. So if perchance the battery fails before the rest of the thing does, you can always replace the battery. Right, so let's take these out, put them on the workbench. There we go. There's a little ring around here you have to take off, so let's do that. There we go. And let's open it up and see what we've got. Yes, it is. That's an 18650 lithium ion battery. There's all the control circuitry, probably a timer in there for that LED. All surface mount. And the price of it was £13.99. So not a bad price for a little soldering iron like this. Those two LEDs there for lighting up your workspace. The on-off switch there. And at this end the USB-C connector. So not a lot there, but not a lot of money. So that's it, the Parkside PLK A4B3 cordless soldering iron. If you're quick, they've probably still got some left. I'll definitely recommend it. It's a good bit of kit. Thanks for listening. This is Steve, G3YLA. Back to the studio.
Well, it's so professional as well, isn't it? You've got a job on one of those home shopping channels, Steve, except I don't recommend you take them apart. I don't think that's...
That made me think of you.
Really? Well, you do, but that's radio amateurs. We take things apart. We want to see what we've made, what we've bought, and how it's made and everything. That's how I got started in doing anything, I think, when I was a kid. Drove my parents mad taking toys apart, see how they work. Anyway, thank you very much to all of you, Steve, and everybody for sending all the contributions this week. Let's go over to Tammy for Little People.
Yep, here's Little People for this week. Have you ever wondered how you get a sesame roll?
Push it over? No. Oh. Oh, yes.
Somebody has to put them on, don't they?
Yeah. Is that what really happens, though?
Yeah, of course.
That's not to scale, is it? Well.
They don't grow on there, do they?
No, that's true. That is good. As always, these are, very imaginative pictures and created on a Japanese company or Japanese, maybe an individual, this is the website to go to, miniature-calendar.com, and they create a new picture every single day, and Tammy picks one for us. Thank you for that, Tammy. Makes me feel hungry though. Lovely, thank you. So what have you been doing? As we said, thank you very much indeed for all of the news and things for we catch up. We are going to be more in the pattern now of every other week again for quite some time. So we'd love to hear from you. Keep us in touch. Send us details to this address. It's radio@dcpmicro.com, usual email address, and send it to us at the absolute latest by the 3 o'clock on the day of NARC Live, and then we'll include it in that week's programme. But thank you for everything that you've sent us so far. Please keep in touch. Great way for the club to keep in touch. So now back to our competition, which we set, 3 weeks, nearly 4 weeks ago now, and we asked you, what on earth is this? Now, I sort of gave some clues, but you always tell me off for going into clues anyway.
Yeah.
So what did you think this was? Have we got any offers online, by the way?
No, I don't think we have, actually.
Okay. And by the way, I must mention that by Malcolm in a moment. I've just seen he's put a comment on about the picture of Caister. Anyway, let's do the competition. Firstly, from Neil G3YLA, he says it's clock. More specifically, it's a universal equinoctial ringed sundial. This one looks decorative as the required markings are missing or perhaps not visible in this photo. It's tempting to make a bigger one that works as a stealth small loop antenna.
Phil G4LPP, is this an artsy garden sprinkler?
Nev M0NFY says, I think this is either a work of art or possibly a sundial.
Martin G7UGB, I think the mystery object is a training or piece of gymnastic equipment for teaching butterflies to fly better.
I love that. You can just see, that's good, isn't it? Yeah, I can see that. Bruce G4KZT says, I think the latest mystery object is a wind spinner. It could probably be tuned as an antenna for 2 meters, but I suspect there will be some flutter on the signal.
Colin M0GMK, I think this week's object is an ornate garden watering sprinkler. Paul
G3VPT says, is it an armillary sphere? I should have read this first. An armillary sphere still under construction, or a tuned loop antenna on test outside the butterfly breeding hut? Sometimes I wonder if people see the same pictures as I do, you know. Anyway.
Steve M0YRU and Marie M7YRU. We think it's either a garden sprinkler or a very nice garden sculpture. This was probably made by a bored plumber who has just acquired a new pipe bending machine at the start of lockdown. Either way, it is beautiful, and can you make us one?
Absolutely. And finally, from entries sent to us, Tony M0TDK says, I think the current mystery object is some kind of garden ornament, possibly claimed to be a mole scarer or bird scarer, but probably not very effective, he said. And that's it. So, Tammy, it's a time to reveal what on earth that was.
Well, it was, or is, it is a water sprinkler.
That is what it is. And it was meant to deceive you, and we nearly got the Photoshop out and got rid of the butterfly, and then you really would have thought it was some kind of fancy area, wouldn't you? But anyway, well done. Thank you very much to Jock2E0BNI for sending us that. Now, Tammy, before we go to the next object, this is a bit where I haven't done this for a while, where you don't know quite what's going to happen.
No.
So can we come back to seeing some pictures, please? Right. Now, many weeks ago, it's possibly even a couple of months ago, we had a kind of bet, didn't we? Do you remember that?
All right, yeah, and you never paid me, yeah.
Give me a moment. Okay, because I bet Tammy, I said, nobody's going to guess that.
I can't remember what it was.
No,
now.
I can't remember. It was so long ago. But anyway, basically someone did guess it.
Oh,
a couple of people
I
did.
remember what it was. It was James's gun for the
Oh, that's right.
teddy
For
bears.
labelling. Yeah, some people say labelling clothes and things.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Okay, so I didn't think anybody would get it because I knew that James used it to label things in arcade machines.
Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't pay you, did I? But obviously, well, I can't. I mean, do you know, I bet this lady £10. And it took me ages to save up.
Was it £10? I thought it was £5.
£5, sorry, yeah.
I'll have 10 though, if you like.
No, but there we are. I've saved it up, hard earned. There's some pennies there, there's some tuppences, there's some 20p's and 10p's and everything else, okay?
Thanks.
There you go.
What?
But I don't want to give you that because you've got a chance for that magical quiz game that we call Double or Quits. Because would you like... No, don't spoil it. Because you've got a chance. Now, I'm going to say the same thing this week, but I don't think anybody's going to guess what this is. And I have to say that I've been helped by somebody because we had loads and loads of correspondence, obviously, about me not paying Tammy this well. Not, let's say loads, I mean couple. Well, actually, when I say couple, it's one. One person felt sorry for me and has sent me a picture to use for What on Earth that says that nobody's going to guess this and there's a chance for you to win your £5 back. So, Tammy, do you accept the challenge of Double or Quits with this? You can either take the £5. There is £5 there. There really is, yeah. All the silver and stuff. I've been saving it. It's not easy. I've been asking people, have you got any spare change, please? And all that sort of thing. Honestly, it's embarrassing. Anyway, I have saved it. It's taken this long. But you can take that now, or you can try and go for the double, the £10.
I don't actually know what it is this week because
Well, it's up to you. It is up to you. If we don't have a competition. But I hadn't thought of you saying no. I thought the thought of £10 you'd win through.
Yeah, somebody will know what it is, I'm sure. Just because I don't.
Apart from the person who sent it, by the way, you can't double cross me
I don't know
like that.
who sent it. So.
Well, I'm not going to tell you that yet. So anyway, all right. So this is it then. This is if you want Tammy to win £10, you need to work out what this is, and if you don't know what it is, then I get it to keep this £5. Okay. Right, here we go. So, what on earth is this? Now, to give you a help, because I realise that's just a blue box of piece of equipment and things, okay, this person sent me. He sent me a picture of the insides of it. Now, this is dangerous now, because I'm kind of making it a bit easier. But for those of you who love gadgets and how things work and everything, we're now going to show you the second picture of what's inside. Does that help? This is a real piece of equipment. God, I'm tense. Am I going to lose a tenner here, or am I going to get my fiver
I've got a little
back?
theory what it is, but I'm not going to say because obviously.
Really?
Although I should tell everybody. Cause
you can't enter. No, you're part of the staff. You can't enter. All right, so if you know what that is anyway, please let us know. Let us have your answers within just under 2 weeks. But as soon as you know what that is, to radio@dcpmicro.com. We will put this picture on Facebook and also on our club website and newsletter and see if you can guess what that is.
If I whisper it to you in a minute, will you tell me if I'm right?
Certainly not.
Do you know what it is?
I do. Well, I'm not saying any more because this is definitely not one where I'm going to give a clue, guys. All right. Anyway, we must get on to tonight's guest. So just a quick reminder of, or let you know what's happening this week at NARC. So on Saturday, we've got the Kablenz Sked on 7.123 megs at 10 o'clock. Hopefully some of you will join us for that. Sunday at 7 o'clock on GB3NB, we've got the GB2RS News at 7. And on Monday at 7:30, also on GB3NB, we've got the Monday Night Net, followed at 8 o'clock the 80 metre CW net on 3.543 megahertz. Now, we don't meet here next week. We meet actually back at CNS when we've got a social, and also we've got Bright Sparks for our younger members, and we'll be back here for NARC Live in 2 weeks' time. But meantime, as I said, please keep in touch. Send us your pictures and news and everything as you see. And also, of course, remember, we've still got our club card, which we're very happy to send to anybody who would appreciate a card to cheer them up, maybe celebrating a special occasion, an anniversary or birthday or whatever. Just send the details to us, to the name and address, and we will add your name to ours and send it to them. Now, with thanks to the patience of our next guest, he hardly needs any introduction to anybody in Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, at least, I'm sure. But it's lovely to welcome a good friend of the club, a member of the club, someone who's on our committee. And tonight he's going to tell us all about Propquest. So let's welcome Jim, G3YLA. Jim.
David, Tammy, hello.
Can I just ask you,
yes.
Slightly off script, do you know
it's not a forecast question,
no,
is it?
No, not a forecast. Do you know what that thing is?
No.
Good.
No, I have no idea what that thing is.
It's been carefully guarded. I just wanted to know. All right. Anyway, Jim, you're going to tell us tonight about Propquest, and I'm going to leave you to do that. And as always, for you at home, if you've got any questions for Jim or any comments, or you've used Propquest or anything like that, save them up or send them to us during Jim's talk, and we'll read them to him at the end, and we'll get him to answer them. But now over to Jim to find out more about Propquest. Jim.
Thanks very much. Well, firstly, thanks for having me on to talk about Propquest again, because it's one of these rather complicated programs that is so useful. It takes quite a while to get to know all the little ins and outs, and I think it's always worth just refreshing you, especially as we come up to what is the start of this year's sporadic geese season, when Propquest can be quite a useful tool to have in the shack. And there'll be several of you who are fairly new into the hobby since the last time this was covered, and the site has developed a bit over the period, so worth just letting you know what the current state is and what we're doing. But like last time, I think it's well worth, well, in fact, judging from, I get emails from folk asking about Propquest and asking about sporadic and things like that, and judging by the sorts of questions that I get, there are some areas that after you've done your license exam, especially new call signs, you tend to forget some of the basics of propagation, and yet there's so much the meat and drink of the hobby that if you don't keep abreast of what the ionosphere is doing, you sort of feel that you miss out on pretty much everything that's happening that controls how the band is on a given day. And it's such a shame not to be part of that. So this is by way of a little bit of a review of some of those things. So I make an apology straight away at the beginning that is to say sorry if, obviously, for many of you, this will be teaching grandma to suck eggs. But as a general rule, to set things in place for what follows, it never hurts just to go through some of, I've forgotten the name of the guy. But anyway, he would have called them the fundy modes. So we're going to do some fundy modes. And the first thing I want to do is to just give you a quick list of the sorts of things that I'm going to talk about. So we're going to have a quick primer about the features of the ionosphere, which are important to us as amateurs on a day-to-day basis of controlling how the band feels. We're going to look at how it's measured. We're going to think about the aims of Propquest, what it's there to do, and have a look at the way it handles measurements of the ionosphere. Now, I want to say that for the most part, Propquest is it's a measurement tool. It's not a prediction as such. For most of it, there's one bit that is, which I'll cover in a minute. But for the most part, it is a measurement of what's actually happening now. So I want you to think of this as being something that kind of explains why the bands sound like they do, what it is about the ionosphere that makes 80 meters sound like this, or make 40 meters go long skip, and all the rest of it. So it's all about making those things come alive, so that if you look at Propquest, and of course you can look at Propquest any time at all, and as you follow how the ionosons send their readings every 10 or 15 minutes or so, you can equate what you're hearing and the changes, and they can be quite obvious changes at certain times of the day, why the band suddenly does what it does. And that's what we're going to do. So basically it's sort of lifting the bonnet of the ionosphere, seeing what's going on. And then the prediction element is to use, prediction parts of meteorology, so weather forecasting, some elements, to perhaps get an insight as to what the ionosphere might be doing, because some things up there in the ionosphere are actually influenced very strongly by the weather. So being able to say something about that, or at least try and get a flavour for it, is a useful thing. So anyway, that's what we're going to do. So firstly, a quick sort of schematic of where we're at, bearing in mind this vertical scale is logarithmic, and our main layer that you will be familiar with, the F layer for long distance communications, and this is the workhorse of amateur radio. So when you're having HF QSOs on, say, 20 meters to the States or to Asia or to Australia or South Africa or whatever, you're going to be dealing with the F layer. And then we have some things that go on below that in the E layer, which is an area of particular interest of mine because it's where sporadic E lives. Well, the ionization of the E layer generally isn't that useful to us, just based on how high the sun is in the sky. It does ionize the molecules up there, but it doesn't do enough to affect our propagation in a major way. But for some occasions, special occasions, you can get intense ionization there. Some of it comes from a contribution from meteors, so as they come in through the upper atmosphere, the friction, they burn up, and all these ionized particles will become part of a very dense area of ionization at E layer heights. Now you might say, well, why aren't we getting all this malarkey going on in the F layer? And that's a very good question. But of course, meteors burn up when the meteorite the meteor actually impacts on the molecules of the atmosphere. And as you come closer to the Earth, there's more of them. So the atmosphere gets denser. And it's just that it's not dense enough up there in the F layer to cause them to ionize in a strong enough way. But by the time they get down through these upper layers and reach the E region heights, then the heating effect is enormous, and you get these very intense meteor trails, and that's important to us because it becomes fuel for sporadic E. So when they've looked at sporadic E, where they've had access to sounding rockets that go up into the ionosphere from research locations, and they've found a sporadic E cloud, because they're pretty random sort of things, but they've been lucky enough on occasions to find a cloud to shoot the rocket into. When they've looked at what these areas of sporadic E are made of, lo and behold, you find it's full of ions from meteors that have burnt up, so iron and silica and so on, so magnesium and such like. So whatever the meteor is made of, you will get ionization from that. They call it ablation, as it burns up and it leaves behind this trail that you can reflect or refract signals from. Below that, we've got the D layer, which doesn't appear as a measurement on most of the things we look at, but it's what you have to have in the back of your mind as to why the LF bands aren't particularly good during the daytime. Because when the D layer gets ionized, it's sufficiently dense to stop LF frequencies. I'm thinking here of top band and 80 meters, and to some extent 40, but usually top band and 80 from passing through it. So they don't go up to reach the F layer, and you don't have much activity during the daytime. During the winter, it's slightly different because the solar elevation, the sun's lower in the sky in the winter, so therefore the amount of ionization you get isn't very great compared to the summer. So the D layer isn't such a big absorber in the winter. Anyway, so what can we say? We can say the sunspot cycle varies the amount of ionization that we get. Seasons vary it, obviously, because of what I just said about the height of the sun in the sky alters the amount of radiation you get per unit area. So that controls the ionization levels. And then the time of day, obviously. You tend to get a maximum in the middle of the day when the sun's at its highest. So, as I say, some layers are not necessarily better when they become strongly ionized. So the D layer is the culprit there, and that region at about 80 kilometers-ish, it can be a problem. So the air is much denser than it is at the E layer. So they absorb the low frequency radio signals. So anything below 40 meters, sort of 80 and top band in particular. So that happens during the daytime when it gets ionized by the sun. But as soon as the sun goes over the yard arm sort of thing and starts setting, then the ionization levels decrease, and the D layer becomes transparent again because there's not enough ionisation there to absorb top band and 80. So suddenly you start hearing longer distance signals on top band and 80, because your signals will go all the way through here and up to the F layer at the top and back down to a GM or a GI or so on, or into the continent. So that's something to have in the back of your mind. And then we have things to do with the difference between day and night. So obviously, as I've said, this D layer is there during the daytime, but during the night when it's gone, then the signal can go all the way up to the F layer and you get your sky wave and so on. But during the daytime, because this gets blocked, your HF frequencies aren't really going to, your LF frequencies aren't really going to go through this. So they get absorbed and you just get local sort of top band net distances of a few tens of miles, 20, 30, 40, 50 miles on a good day, because your signals rely on ground wave propagation. Oh, why did that do that? There we go. Let's go on to this one. So then we have sporadic E sporadic, or it's just, I'm going to move this little window out of the way here. So the sporadic E season is primarily May to August, and you tend to first notice it with signals becoming really quite strong on 10 meters. And if it progresses and gets a better ionization level going in this E region down here, you'll find signals start getting affected on 6 meters and then 4 meters, and more rarely up onto 2 meters. And because of the height of the E layer, the skip distances are going to be lower than they would be on the F layer, because the F layer up here would give you 3,000 or 4,000 kilometers or so. I'd imagine. Whereas the E layer, you're much lower, so you're in the order of 2,000, 2,500 kilometers. So it's a shorter distance, but you can get some remarkably strong signals. It's a very exciting thing to work. So these patches within the E layer that for a particular reason can be very intensely ionized, and it's not about a sudden zap from the sun necessarily doing the job for you here. It's not that causes this extra ionization. It's the ability of wind in the very top levels of the atmosphere, in the ionosphere, in the E region. It's the ability of the winds to converge what ionization is there into a more dense region. So it becomes dense enough to refract your signals. And the losses can be quite low because it's almost a reflecting process that goes on. So this ease activity tends to come because of these winds that happen up in the E region. This isn't the talk to go into details of that, but you'll be able to look up various talks that have happened over the years that I've done that explain a bit more about that. But you tend to find two periods, one in the morning and one in the late afternoon and evening. But at the beginning and end of the season, particularly the beginning, you quite often see a tendency to just get one opening in the middle part of the day, but it's not a hard and fast rule. Basically, with any sort of propagation, you want to be checking, well, tuning the band, seeing what it sounds like, but also looking on the clusters and seeing what activity is taking place. Right, so just to explain the basic sort of term, the sky wave, you need some layer up in here to refract your signal back again from this sudden increase in ionization. And the ground wave tends to be a limited distance. And then after the ground wave runs out, you've got nothing going on in here. So you don't hear anybody, or you don't hear this person, but you have to depend on it coming all the way back down again from here. So about 4,000 kilometers, which is much greater than this dead zone, which, is probably about 3K or so, perhaps even a bit more. This ground wave distance for LF is pretty short. Right, so most QSOs rely on entering the ionosphere at a fairly shallow angle. So it's not like you're going straight up and down again, usually. So the maximum usable frequency could be quite high the shallower the angle. So if you come in at a steep angle, like this red dotted line here, you might only be able to go up as high as 20 megahertz, and a slightly shallower angle, 25 megahertz. But this no longer comes back down to ground again. So the geometry is all wrong. And if you go even higher in frequency, it goes right through it. So there's a frequency at which it gets refracted back down to a station here. Anything higher than that, anything higher than 20 megahertz will go right through. So this tells us that for a given state of the ionosphere, there is a maximum usable frequency, the MUF. So that can be something like 3 or 4 times a critical frequency. And the critical frequency is what happens if you send a signal straight up and down again and measure the highest frequency that will be returned from the ionosphere. So the critical frequency will be quite a low figure, but the band that you can go on, the frequency that you can use, is going to be higher than that by 3 or 4 times, because you're entering it not straight up and down, but you're going in at an angle, which gives you a better chance of the signal coming back down to ground. Now, it can be a bigger multiple than that for sporadic E, because of the extreme contrast in the change in ionization on the edge of a sporadic E layer. So that could be 8 to 10 times the FC value. Anyway, all exciting stuff that we can look at on the measurements. So there's one other thing just to mention, not that we use it very often in amateur radio discussions, but the lowest usable frequency is the lowest frequency that you can get through the D, because I said this D layer, this lowest layer here, it absorbs LF frequencies. So there'll be a frequency which will eventually go through it. And if you go higher than that, you'll be fine. You'll get to the F region and you'll be able to have your DX QSOs. But in the daytime, if you go too low in frequency, it gets absorbed in here, won't go through it. And that is known as the lowest usable frequency. So we end up with an F layer, which actually during the daytime splits into 2. So you have an F1, the lower one, and an F2 layer. And quite a difference in height between them, and you can get interactions between them. So sometimes you get some peculiar path fading things and such like going on, because it's very rarely a simplistic straight up here and a refraction and then down again. You could have a mix of signals at the receiver, some from the F1 layer and some from the F2 layer. So you can get quite complicated things going on. But we can get sort of a sense of what's driving it. Anyway, let's just have a look at the final bit about the background to this, which is ionosons. Now, I'm sure you'll all have heard of ionosons. These are ionosonic sounders, which will measure by pushing a radio signal vertically upwards and seeing the highest frequency. You sweep the frequency. So as the frequency goes HF, you'll get a return from the thing going up and down again. You'll get a return, and then as you go higher in frequency, it'll go straight through. And that frequency at which it goes straight through is the critical frequency. And that's the highest frequency that will come back down again. Now, it varies between summer and winter. We've got a very nice example of that, which I can show you in a little while. So in the summer, it tends to be a bit more subdued, about 4 megahertz to 9 megahertz, whereas in the winter, it can be appreciably higher, up to about 14 megahertz. So it does vary from season to season for reasons which I won't go into, but it's to do with the distribution of the molecules, what few there are up here to be ionized. They change between summer and winter, and that alters how much ionization you can get to make these values for the critical frequency. So this critical frequency, if you're looking at, remember we saw in a previous slide, the F layer splits into an F1 and an F2. Well, if you focus on the F2, the upper one of these that does most of the work, then the critical frequency is known as the FOF2. It's the frequency of the ordinary wave, and I won't go into all the complexities of an extraordinary and ordinary wave, but the ionosondes mention them both. The one you want is the FOF2. So it's the frequency, the critical frequency of sending a signal all the way up to the F2 layer and coming back down again. So the ionosondes measure this and a lot of other stuff. So you've got to learn how to sort them out, and this is what we sort out. The FOF2 gets mentioned, and that's usually the top figure when you happen to look at one of these ionosondes. So in this case, it turns out to be 7.8 megahertz. And that you can see on the axis along the bottom here. So along the bottom, we've got frequency in megahertz. And up the vertical axis, we've got the altitude in kilometers. So here we can see 200 kilometers, 400, 600, and so on. So here's our return, and this is the red line we're looking at, and the green line is the other one I mentioned, the extraordinary one. But let's concentrate on the red one, and you can see it comes back at 6 megahertz, comes back at 7 megahertz, slightly higher value. So it takes, as the frequency increases, it penetrates a little bit farther through the F2 layer. So the higher the frequency, remember we saw that there's eventually a frequency where if you're high enough, you go right through it. So you'd expect this curve to just start swinging upwards, because as you move along the axis here, going from 5 megahertz to 6 megahertz, 7 megahertz, your signal gets further and further in to the F2 layer before it gets bent enough to come back down. And then at some point, it won't come back down, it'll go right through. And that point is where this slides up and the line goes pretty much vertically. And this axis here is your 7.8 megahertz for the FOF2. So that's how it's measured on an ionosonde. And you can do the same thing for the E region. And in this case, there's a figure derived just in here. It's a fairly limited one at 2.5 megahertz. And also you get another parameter out of here, the height of the E layer, the sporadic E, which is 131 kilometers in this instance. But there's loads of useful stuff on these. But the main ones we want to have a look at are the FOF2, which is the critical frequency of the upper F layer. So it's the one that affects HF propagation, and the FOEs, which is going to tell us whether we've got sporadic E or not. So what's Propquest? I'll tell you what. First of all, David, do you want to see if there's any questions from that first little bit of...
Don't think so, no. One little thing though, you remember at the beginning you used a word, and I can't remember the phrase, and you said you couldn't think who did it. Someone did write in, Mike Mobbs, G3YLA, and says it was Stanley Unwin.
He's the boy.
Right,
yeah.
So not directly related to your talk, but yeah, he's the man who, I can't possibly do it. But
well done, Mike.
The way he turned the words around and made them ulibu.
Yeah, it was great entertainment back in the day. In the days of black and white television. Yeah, so the funding modes, right? So we can obviously look at those slides after. I'm sure, David, you'll have the slides available, or the talk will be recorded. So
sure, it's recorded. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, you can have a look at those. So anyway, so what does Propquest do? Well, Propquest gathers a sample set of ionosondes that are of use to us. I mean, there's dozens of sites all around the world, and huge amounts of data. So you imagine these things are pulsing the ionosphere every 10 minutes or every 5 minutes. and they're going day in, day out, 24/7. That's a lot of data. So Propquest isn't about replicating all these big science databases. There's a wonderful one in the States, which I go to get the data from. So what we want to do is, as amateurs, to be able to see what these things are in real time as we're listening on the band. And one of the issues with the normal way of looking at an ionoson, this example that we had here, just imagine you've got that at a fixed time, and then you've got to wait 10 minutes, you've got to have a look at the next one, and so you don't get a sense of time changes very easily from looking at single snapshots like this. So the aim of Propquest was initially just to be able to plot an evolving graph of what these parameters were doing during the day. So we could see if there were trends, if there were differences one day to the previous one, and so on. And it means you can then relate what you hear in your speaker from the receiver to what the ionosphere is physically actually doing. This isn't a prediction of what it'll do tomorrow or in 10 hours time or whatever. This is what it's doing now, or as near as now as makes no difference within the last 20 minutes or so. And it shows you how the day changes. And the more you look at that as the day evolves and over many days, you soon get to understand exactly. It's as if you can see the ionosphere. You can suddenly realize why it behaves the way it does. So you learn how the graphs can explain what you're hearing. You can use archive data to plan sked times. So supposing you wanted to plan a sked on 80 meters in a certain month of the year, you can have a look at some data that will allow you to do that. And then we get to the predictive element for sporadic E, separate talks, but I refer you to ones on sporadic E, which explore the possible link between weather patterns in the lowest bit of the atmosphere and sporadic E way up there in the ionosphere. And the link is to do with how the wave motions are affected from turbulence, particularly to do with jet streams. You know, when you fly off on holiday, you'll get the please fasten your seatbelts sign coming up. Well, that turbulence, as it turns out, can be quite instrumental in sending up a wave train that goes all the way up from the weather bit down at, say, about 10, 12 kilometers above the ground, all the way down here, right the way up to the E layer at over 100 kilometers. And these turbulent distortions can be the mechanism that gets all this meteor dust, if you like, and draws it together, compresses it into an ionization patch that becomes sporadic E. So that's another part of weather Propquest, which will be useful to see. So anyway, let's just have a look. Well, the first thing, yeah, you got to read the manual. So we really do have to, in complex things like a lot of science subjects, and radio's no exception, you've got to have a read through this and give yourself time to digest it, and all the different various bits and pieces in here have a few notes explaining what the bit is trying to do, what it's trying to say, and do please have a look at that. So that's this I logo here. So the fourth tab on the right, about, have a look at that and read that, and go down these tabs on the left hand side and just pick up the background to what it's all about, and then the rest of it is going to make a lot more sense. So that's the starting point. Then we have the main display, which is this FOF2. Now we've heard schematically what that looks like, what it's doing, and how we measure it. So the FOF2 is this lowest red line here at the bottom. Can you see the key down the bottom here? Incidentally, if you click on these icons, the labels for the different lines, if you click on it, you can switch it on or off. So if this is too crowded and you just want the FOF2, click on these, you'll switch them all off, and the graph will redraw. So you'll be able to see this in splendid isolation. So let's see what we've got here then. So this was yesterday, I think I did this, or the day before. Where was it? 9th, so it's yesterday. So you can see the FOF2 usually has a dip around about dawn, just before dawn. And remember, the sun will be rising at the height of the ionosphere a long while before it reaches the surface sort of height. So our dawn is a lot later. This is our time of sunrise. So in the ionosphere, it will have started to turn up. You can see, about half an hour before we get sunrise officially at the surface. Anyway, so here it comes, slowly picking up, and the FOF2 has a lot of wobbles in it. It's not a solid figure. It's not like a square wave. It's got all sorts of characteristics, things sloshing around up there, and various chemistry and physics and movements that are going to make it variable. But in general, you can see we're sitting here around or just over 7 megs. So remember when I said for the actual communication, the maximum usable frequency is it's not the FOF2, this straight up and down frequency. It's what you get by going in at an angle for a skip distance, your 4,000 kilometer skip difference. And I did say you could get 3 or 4 times. So 3 times 7 is 21. So we're up here at 21 megs, which works out about right. On a good day, you might get 4 times, but 21 is very good. This is for a skip distance of 3,000 kilometers. So it works. So anyway, looking at these other red and increasingly orangey coloured lines going up, you'll see this lowest one, the red one, was the FOF2. Then we have 100 kilometers MUF. So that's if you look to a distance 100 kilometers away, you're not going straight up and down anymore, but you're going at a fairly steep angle. But because you're not straight up and down, you've got slightly better chance of getting a frequency refracted back down again. It's not hugely different, but it's a little bit better. And then if you go further away in distance, 500 kilometers, so you're getting into Germany now for your signal, you're at a bit of a shallower angle, so the frequency that you can go up to is a bit better still. And then at 1,000 kilometers away, sort of southern Germany, Switzerland sort of area, you're up to 10 megs. So from the FOF2 at 7 megs, we now find we can use 10 megs or 30 meters to talk to somewhere farther away. So this is the point you have to remember, that these upper lines, it won't be for you working somebody 100 kilometers away or 200 kilometers away in the UK, because that's too steep. But it will be for working into Europe. You'd be able to get that sort of frequency to come back down again in Switzerland, for example, say. And then if you go to the full length, say at least 3,000 kilometers, you could go all the way up to 21 megahertz. So 15 meters might be open. So you can see how by looking at these longer distances, these different MUF distances, the frequency, the band that you can go on goes higher. So when you go on 21 megs, you don't usually expect to hear short skip signals, do you? You don't go on 15 meters, 21 megs, if you want to work somebody in the Midlands. You go there if you want to work these bigger distances, 3,000 kilometers, say. And remember, when you work people on HF, you may not just be using one skip. You could be using 2 or 3 skips to get across the Atlantic to the States. So all of those points where the signal meets the ionosphere, hopefully will support your 21 megahertz signal. Now, if it isn't that time in the morning, so supposing we're at 11 o'clock in the morning, and we've got something that looks like this at 9, 10 o'clock in here, the next sort of skip distance at at 1,500 kilometres away, because remember the whole path is 3,000, so halfway is going to be 1,500. So 1,500 kilometres to the west, you might not be as far up this curve, because their local solar time is in here somewhere. So your 15-metre path, your 21 meg signal, will get the first hop. You'll do that very well, but you won't get the second hop because the ionosphere isn't yet ionized enough to do it. So that's why different parts of the world open up at different times. You've got to wait for all of the hops to become ionized enough. So you can imagine, although this isn't a measurement from halfway over the Atlantic or whatever, you've got to imagine what the one would look like if it was similar to this. It would be here somewhere. And the one on the East Coast might be here. So you might find that at the time we're up here on 21 megs just opening up, for your first hop into Europe, you're hearing Switzerland and all the rest of it, or even farther east. Right, you're doing all that. But on the East Coast of the States, the best they can manage to get a signal coming through on would be 14 megs. So when you work to the States, you've got to imagine that one of your paths reflection points or refraction points is here. So that might be 18 megs. So you might be able to use 17 meters if you're only going halfway across. But to get to the States, you've got to think, well, you've got to be down here. So, but you get the idea that by looking at this and imagining what it might look like as you move along a path, it gets quite interesting, doesn't it? You can do this for multi-hop paths and piece together a sort of a rough assessment of what's going on. This purple line at the bottom, by the way, is the FOEs. So it's the frequency of the sporadic E return from a sporadic E signal, if there is one. So a lot of information on one graph. Huge amount, really. And these little boxes up the top here, by the way, you can disable the one that's under the right-hand one, Dorbs in Belgium, and you can click on Chiltern and then press refresh and see what that one looks like. And unclick this one and click on Fairford and refresh and see what that one. So these three are the ones I've chosen to be sort of more representative of things that would interest us. I mean, there's dozens of these things, and there just isn't enough storage to play around and do them all. But for the time being, this is a very good sort of sense of direction of travel of where the ionosphere is on a given day. So let's have a look and see what else we can find. If you hover over one of these lines, you get a little dot to say what the data point is. And then in this box here, you can see actually what the values are. So imagine when we looked at that ionosonde plotted out with the lines peeking up, this is what those numbers were. And there you can see just what frequency is being supported at this particular time, 0920 UTC. At Dorbs in Belgium. So wonderful, a great resource, all these, wonderful stuff. So if you switch, now here's what happens if you switch some of these other lines off. So if you click on that 100-kilometer line, click on the 500, click on the 1000, and click on the FOEs, then you're left with a 3000 kilometer and an FOF2. So here's the worst case, a straight up and down signal, which we saw, and here's the 3000 kilometer thing, which we were just talking about. So it allows you to see more clearly, without all these other lines, what's going on. Right, so here's one from a different day. This was on the 8th, so it's not that long ago, the day before yesterday. And it shows what sporadic E looks like. So here's it. Can you see the little spike down here on the purple line? So the FOEs got to 10 megahertz. So it exceeded the FOF2. So there was a really strong 10.6 megahertz response from a densely ionized sporadic E patch. And then another little patch drifted over there in the early evening, and there was another one in the morning as well. So there's all these disturbances rippling through the ionosphere in the E region in the sporadic E season, and you can see, well, several things come from this. So have a think about what this might be telling us. So one thing it might be telling us is that in general, remember also I said because of the sharp edges to a sporadic E patch, you tend to find in reality that 8 or 10 times the FOE's value is what you might get. So that one at 8 times would have gone up to 80 meters. So you'd have got 4 meters pretty much. So you'd have had a 10 meter sporadic E, 6 meter sporadic E, and 4 meter sporadic E from that one. But the other thing to bear in mind from these is how long they last. So here with the ionization of these F layer things that we see on the orange and the red graphs, once you get to a certain time of day driven by the sun, you're sort of there or thereabouts for the rest of the day. But sporadic E, it's not a given that it's there for the rest of the day at all. In fact, this morning one is reasonably long lasting. You've got about an hour here above 7 megs on that one. So, you know, that's not bad. This one's much shorter. You've probably only got half an hour on there between above 7 megs. And this one doesn't quite make it. So, but if you look at these, you can explain why suddenly you're hearing some strong signals on 10 meters, say short skip. If you were, you know, working into Germany or Holland on 10 meters, that's actually quite a short distance for 10 meters, 28 megs. But that is what you'd be doing with something like that. So these graphs tell you a lot. So the near vertical incidence skywave thing is quite an interesting graph that you can use. So this was for the day with the sporadic E in it. And you can see when you do that, you get things that are perhaps more appropriate for local nets. Say you're thinking about 80 meters. So the FOF2 is for, you know, so let's say you've got a load of us members in the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club wanting a CW net on 80. You know, we might be 50 kilometers apart, pushing it a bit, but we might be. And the FOF2 is going to be there or thereabouts, but you wouldn't want to go much further than that. But anyway, you get well above 80 meters, and it doesn't drop below until, well, it doesn't drop below 80 meters. So at this time of the year, early May, you've got no problems with a sced on 80 meters for short distances. So that works really well. The only thing you've got is in here. Remember, here's sunrise and here's sunset. The only thing you've got in here is the absorption from the D layer. So you'd think, oh, well, we can do 80 and 40 here, can't we, boys and girls? And you can't, because the D layer absorption will take care of that and stop your signals coming through there. But anyway, the spread F index is this blue line, which we don't tend to hear a lot about, but you do find it's that other green line on the ionoson trace, and you do find that you can get a little. It's about half a meg's worth of difference in there between the two lines. Perhaps a bit more than that, between half and 1 meg. So you might be able to squeeze it. We've had nets in the winter season when we've been between these two lines, and you still hear signals, and it works. But it's got that sort of hollowy, echoey sound a bit, as if it's not very reliable. Because usually it's at the time when the graph is starting to come down and the band is going. But anyway, this is a great way of seeing the detail of sporadic E. I mean, just look at all these little pulses of it going through here. You'd have an opening, you know, say on 6 meters, there'd be a really good opening into Eastern Europe, and then it would appear to disappear, gone, finished, and then all of a sudden back again. And you can see how variable this is. it's not at all consistent like these other ones, although they're varying. Once they're in, they're in. So interesting, isn't it? That this will allow you to say, oh yeah, there was a lot of stuff coming through from Austria and Hungary a little while ago, but it seems to have faded out. And then look, we've got another little blip here, so that might be enough. So at 5 megs, average figure, this dotted line across here, 5/8 of 40. You know, you're very nearly up to 50 megs. If you did it 10 times, you'd be on 6 meters. A little blip, just a brief rejuvenation of 6 meters ease. So it's worth checking. Anyway, Spredicky shows up really well on these, and Dorbs, being in Belgium, is a sort of good halfway house point for people from the middle of the UK to get their first refraction from the ease patch before it goes on into the continent. But it gives you an idea of what might be happening deeper in the continent as well. So that's that. So that's the Envis thing, and it's good for local nets, because if you're doing a local net, then you want this red line to be above the band you're on. So 80 meters would be good, and top band would be good. These dotted green lines across the page, by the way, you will have spotted on the right hand side here, they're labeled according to the amateur bands. So they'll give you a guide as to which bands are open. Right, so here's something which is called compare. So we've come all the way down through these. We're now on to compare, and this is quite a useful trick where you can compare 2 dates. So here I've compared the 8th with the 9th, and you know, there can be some terrifically large differences. So it's quite stark how the band can change from one day to another. And you say, well, it was all right yesterday, plenty going on, and today it seems as dead as a dodo. And you look at Propquest and you go onto this compare thing and put the relevant dates in, and there you have it. That's the reason. There wasn't enough ionization on this Tuesday compared to the Monday. So that was a big change. And you could put in dates here. Supposing, say, you were doing the 80 meter CC contest, and you wanted to see why your score was so much lower this week than it was the last week. You just pop in the dates of the 2 80 meter CC contest dates, and you can see straight away what the difference was in terms of conditions. So a very interesting asset that if you're planning. Well, I was going to say, if you're planning differences between, well, which band to use, but sometimes with contests you don't have that choice. But if you want to build up your excuse list, then this might get you off the hook for why it didn't work out so well for you. Right, now this last tab that I want to look at is called averages. And it's called averages because it takes all of the data for the month. So you can select in this drop down box in the top left which month you want to look at. Now, bearing in mind, sometimes we have missing data. You know, we're relying on a professional scientific database. They have all sorts of demands on things. They have resource issues. They have server issues, all sorts of things. We're just so lucky to have access to this that basically we have to take what's there, and apologies, you know, when it doesn't work, but it's outside our control and it works so well most of the time. It really is a remarkable thing to have access to, so we're very pleased. But it saves hundreds of amateurs all sort of overloading their server, asking for things for the UK, because it's all here and you don't need to keep troubling them, because this automatically just goes off and gets the latest reading every 10 minutes. Job done, in, out, finished. So January, let's have a think about what the difference is between a winter month and a summer month. So here we are, January this year. We've got a good high the red line here, the average FOF2 on all of the days. So this is an average, this one. and it's for January 2023. So for all of the days in January 2023, I've averaged the FOF2 at 7:30 in the morning, and it comes up with this. And you can build up a plot of what the average performance of the ionosphere is in that month of January. For the purple line, it's more significant for sporadic E thoughts to not look at what the average conditions are like with the FOF2. But sporadic E is a thing that's all about the best conditions you can possibly get. So what I've done here is looked at the maximum value for the FOE's critical frequency at this time during the month of January. And you can see there are some residual spiky bits going on, tending to cluster in the evening period. So if you were trying to say, well, when should I, doesn't happen very often in the winter, sporadic E, it's a rare old thing. When's the best time? Well, you could say in January 2023, it looks like the evening was a good window of opportunity on that, but that could have been driven by just one event. So what tends to happen in months that are quiet is if you take an average, it just smooths it out and you don't see any characteristic sort of information about time of day when these things happen. Anyway, so January, remember that? January, June. Now here we've got a much lower trace, much flatter. So January we're up here at around 9 megahertz. In June, we're around 6 or 7, so much lower. But a broad sort of range of June is a very high grade sporadic E month, and loads of reports of very respectable maximums FOEs in here. The highest I tend to see is about 10 to 12 megahertz, the very extreme highest. What you have to bear in mind is probably how rare it would be for sporadic E clouds, tiny thing. So are we expecting a lot to think that a sporadic E cloud is going to just hover over an eye on the sun when it does a ping? It probably is a big ask to think that will capture always the best value of ionization that's out there. It probably won't, because it'll be somewhere else. It could even be 2 miles up the road. Frustrating, but that's very localized stuff, sporadic E. So we've got to go in the generalities here. But the one thing that's different is that whereas in the winter any sporadic E excitement tends to be patchy and just isolated, in the summer it's right the way through pretty much the whole period, and that's quite interesting. So this is there's loads of information in here which you could use for thinking about how to plan operating schedules and so on. Right, so that's that. Oh, the other thing is in the top right hand corner you'll see those little 3 lines. Those will give you an option to print the chart or download the chart as an image format, and that's useful if you want to print it in an email to somebody or whatever. And that's those three little bars on the top right. Now this tab is the Ease blog, which I'm now writing. So from May, beginning of May through to the end of August, I write one of these every day, and it's based on what I see with upper air charts, because if you read the info page about sporadic E and things, you'll see there's a big discussion going on in the sporadic E community about the link between jet streams and generating the turbulence that makes sporadic E happen. So these green areas with the yellow core is the strongest bit of the jet streams. That's over 100 knots of wind in there, and the green is slightly less strength, but you'll see how it's a contorted pattern. So it's a continuous current of air in the upper atmosphere, some bits with turbulence, some bits not, and it meanders around the northern hemisphere, and you can see sometimes the curls are very extreme and go a long way north and a long way south, and sometimes come back, there we go, and sometimes they're not so extreme. But the point about this is that ignoring a lot of these lines, the solid black lines are like, well, think of them as the isobars at 300 millibars, which is about 30,000 feet. So where the jet stream lives, these black lines show the ridge and the trough. And here there's a trough, and that's a upper low, and that's an upper ridge there where it goes up and then down. And then the green is the shading for the strength of the jet stream winds. And then the other thing of interest are these blobs of coloured lines, and they are regions where these contour values, the black lines, are changing. So where's a lot of red stuff going on here with the lines, it means the values are falling, decreasing. So the pressure is changing very quickly. So low pressure coming in here, and here blue, increasing values of these pressure lines or contours, and therefore the ridge. This is this ridge here, the axis of the ridge where it goes up and then turns and comes down again. That's the axis of a ridge, and that's moving across towards this area of the highest rises. And they can be regions of turbulence, and can actually help with promoting sporadic E. So there's a lot of stuff on here. It's really an anorak thing for meteorologists, but for quite a few folk who understand weather maps and upper air weather charts. And of course, you've got the about page, so you can always have a look at that. And this will show you how it evolves. So basically, when you're working sporadic E or thinking of it, you want to be aiming to go across these green lines, especially the beginning and end of the stronger bits, or where there's this sort of stuff going on. There's a lot of interest in trying to track down where the important bits of these lines is. So that's all quite complicated, isn't it? I mean, I know there's the text there, so you can go back in here and you can read the text, and I try and be helpful here about what I think is driving all this, but there's only so much you can take in. So what I designed a couple of years ago was this thing called the EPI, which is an ease probability index, which combines a whole bundle of things that affect sporadic E, that probably affect sporadic E. There's a lot of uncertainty about sporadic E, I have to say. I haven't got a big box of answers that says this is exactly what it is, but there's a lot of professional research which is tending to sort of confirm what's going on in general terms, and this is a way of us keeping up to date with it. So this map, the color coding on here, is how big the index, this ease probability index, comes. So it's not like saying there will or won't be ease. This is saying if there is ease, this is where it will be. These are the regions where the weather pattern, you saw on that last chart, the jet streams and all these other things, this is the place where we think the chance is greatest, and so on. And along the bottom left here, there's a slider which opens up with now on it. So that's the current forecast weather chart used to produce this pattern. And you can move the slider along on the website to see how that pattern changes going about 10 to 12 hours ahead or 10 to 12 hours back. Now, the interesting thing to do to see how it's going on is to see where your path, when you work sporadic E, where does your path fit in with all this stuff? What's going on here? So you can put details in. So in the top left, that's you. So your call sign and your locator, and then the person you've worked. You can change that time if you wish, and then click which band, and then you get a little dot on here, and that tells you where you started from. So this was a GM station or an MM station, and he was working DJ6, which it's quite close to us, but it's quite a long way away from Scotland. So now, what sometimes happens when you put this detail in, because of a problem with the Google Map thing behind it, is that it loses the map. And what you have to do is just slide it to the right slightly. So if you do that, you can bring the map back again. And here's your path. And here is the midpoint roughly. And you've got details of the QSO here with the call sign in the bottom left and the call sign locator here, the band and the distance and the time. And you've got the KP index, which it gets the nearest one. So you've got everything you need to define this path. And what I've found over the last year or so of looking at this test version of what we're doing here is that very often these paths cross one of these key areas, but particularly on the edge of one. So the edges, especially the eastern edge of an area, is often quite interesting in terms of where the spreader key might be, because we don't have spreader key everywhere, even though it looks like we should. There's something about certain places that means it happens there. So this is very much a relating what happens to what some of these other patterns are about, to see if something pops off the page that says we can predict these things better. So that's where we've got to with this. It's an exciting sort of project, but there's a lot involved, and it takes a while to get these things done. So one of the things we're looking at is experimenting with a global type scale map, because at the moment we can't quite get all of the path down to VK, for example, for multi-hop on 6 meters. So we're looking at ways in which we might be able to do that. And it all depends upon the good auspices and volunteer effort of a programming colleague of mine at work. So we aren't in a position to be demanding about, yes, let's get this done tomorrow. We know what we're doing. This is a case of fitting in with where we are, but it's come on a long way since it started, and it will continue to develop. But the main thing is that you make use of the facilities and what it's trying to tell you, because it's got a huge amount of detail in it. So here's some links and references. If you want to ask me questions after the event, when you've looked at the slides again, because there's a lot to take in, then send me an email there. Propquest is there, and you can go online and look at it now. DX Maps, ON4KST, G3YLA, loads and loads of really excellent cluster mapping websites for putting paths on to see how these things are working. So loads of things there, and big thank yous to WeatherQuest for hosting this on their server. Whoops. Let's go back to that so you can see it. Dan Holly, the programmer, who's done a fantastic job with this. Really, really indebted to Dan for the work he's put into this over the years, and very, very helpful in terms of suggesting ways to take the layout and design forwards. Been really good. I'm still trying to work on getting him to become a radio amateur, but so far he's doggedly resisting. Too busy storm chasing, I think. These folk need a huge pat on the back, because this is the professional server which stores the INOSON data. And of course you need a tremendous pat on the back, all of you, because your logs and putting your QSOs onto the clusters is what flags things to me, say, oh, that's interesting, we'll see what. So there's a whole bunch of folk, and there's all the professional research, some papers coming out even within the last 2 or 3 weeks that I've seen, with some whole new things going on that's confirming some of the stuff and adding new things to think about. So it's a very active area. But anyway, really big subject. But propagation, what your hobby is very much shown in images on these Propquest graphs. You can you can really get a flavour of. It's like having, I suppose, an echo sounder when you go fishing and you can see where the fish are. So having Propquest, you can see where the ionosphere is helping you and where it's not. Anyway, I'll leave those up there, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Jim. Thanks. Well, big subject, big program, wonderful thing to create. So for you at home now, this is the time to ask questions, maybe make comments, suggestions of things that you'd like to see on the site. Have you used Propquest? What would you like to see, and how useful have you found it? We've got one question already online. Before we go to that, Jim, can I just ask you, is this fairly unique as far as you know in the amateur world, something like this? What made you do it?
Well, it was our 80 metre club net, our CW net, that we have on a Monday evening. And we had some very frustrating ones on occasions, and the 80 metre CC contests, which the club does very well with. But we had times when, to be honest, we'd barely work a dozen stations, and yet other times when we'd work over 100. And it was quite intriguing as to what was driving that big variation. So it was a way of, I think the fundamental point, David, is that in my day job in meteorology, you were always plotting things as they're happening to look for trends and to look for evolutions of patterns. You wouldn't dream of studying something without having this continually evolving plot approach to life. So it seemed a natural step to take for this. But up until this happened, you'd get the odd graph done for a research project or somebody investigating a particular day and publishing a propagation article in one of the magazines, say. But you wouldn't have anywhere where you could go and see this on a regular basis. And I just thought that the hobby, which really is driven by this so much, wouldn't it be nice to be able to see this and see how it's going? I'm working on something additionally for the ionosphere values and how high the ease is, and loads of other clever things that we can do now with programming that will add a new dimension, and one day perhaps that will appear on it as well. But for the time being, this is the starting point of getting people to think, I'm listening to something on the loudspeaker and I want to understand how that sits with what the ionosphere is doing. It's not in isolation. What you hear from your speaker is dependent entirely on what these graphs are showing you, what the ionosphere is doing. So it's really good to be able to learn over the months and weeks and whatever how that works, how that's linked, and then you become, a much more reasoned operator about when is the best time to actually look on the bands for things and what to expect.
Absolutely. It's interesting to hear the background from it. Okay, Jim, well, I've got a question so far, only one so far, so please do ask them and make any other comments. Richard G4CDN says, several times I've noticed big electrical storms under the scatter point during 2 metre E's, often over the Alps. Is there a possible link?
Well, there kind of may be, but it's not a very strong one. So it is a really excellent question, because the first thing that got me, the thing that got me interested in sporadic E work was when people said, look, we worked sporadic E the other day and I noticed there was a thunderstorm over Europe. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. Because thunderstorms happen, as we've seen today, they're clouds in the lower bit of the atmosphere. Well, in the troposphere, they're the tallest clouds we make, but they go up to about 10, 12 kilometres height. So they're big, but they're not up to 100 kilometres. So I thought this was worth looking at. So the consideration here is thunderstorms eventually reach the top of the atmosphere where there's a stable layer. And the updraft in a thunderstorm, it can be incredibly strong. So you can get air going upwards vertically at over 100 miles an hour, a strong updraft. It's phenomenal. You couldn't imagine it. But it's why you get such big raindrops or huge lumps of hail out of a thundercloud, because they've got such strong updrafts. You can hold this material up there. And this eventually reaches the stable layer at the top of the atmosphere. And this anvil, flat top of a cumulonimbus cloud, has, you'll see on satellite pictures if you zoom in on them, there's the top of the turret, and there's this rippling that comes out from the top of the turret, turret, you know, where the cloud's rising. So think of it like you're looking at a pond where you've thrown a stone in and go plop, and then all these ripples run out. You can see that in the cirrus cloud on the top of a thundercloud. So that's a wave motion being generated, and it's quite probable that some of this activity may propagate up to produce E's. But on the other hand, if these things are associated also with a jet stream, then a jet stream blowing over a mountain range is a very good way of disturbing it and generating this wave motion as well. So it's very hard to say whether it was the thunderstorm or the jet stream that was the actual trigger, what was really doing the work. And suffice to say that on some days where you had very good examples of E's, the actual focal point where all the paths cross has been under a big ridge of high pressure, absolutely gin clear skies, not cloudy in the sky, let alone a thunderstorm. So thunderstorms aren't the only thing that's necessary to make E's. They could contribute to it, but the thing about a thunderstorm is actually many of them have very limited life cycles. So they go up and then they'll rain on stuff and cool the air below them, and they switch themselves off. So it's like an ALC circuit. You do occasionally get those that are more long-lasting, but as a rule, pulse-type thunderstorms wouldn't last long enough probably for all this stuff to happen and make a prolonged episode of E's. So I would favour some other cause. Potentially it's a combination of a jet stream and the Alps, but that's not to say thunderstorms haven't done it. I have seen examples where they've done it, but they're very few and far. It might only represent 10-15% of the total, if that. The vast majority have been associated near jet streams.
Okay, thank you, Jim. We still haven't got any other comments or questions, actually. But I've got one for you. Oh, there is one, sorry, from Phil, G3YLA. Hi, Jim. I know that sprites have been observed by astronauts on the ISS, ionised streaks rising vertically much higher above storm clouds. Could these be relevant to the ionisation of the upper atmosphere?
Well, that's a good question, Phil, because they are, in fact, ionisation in themselves. The thing about them is that you see them on these time-lapse films and very fast cameras. And the point about the sprites is they are ionising the gases in the air going up a long, long way. And I'm not quite sure whether they go up as far as the E region. They probably do, but they're certainly up there or thereabouts. Now, the thing is, they are just so quick that they wouldn't be in action for long enough to give enough to get the ionisation to last, you know, because it's only there because of the sprite. It's not there for gathering the meteor debris together or anything like that. So as soon as the sprite has been and gone and switched off, then you haven't got your path anymore. So I would think, although they may affect ionisation in that region, my view would be that they're probably too transient and wouldn't have an effect on sporadic E.
Mm. I mean, you talked about speed there. This is a question for me, really. But you said that these were virtually live, but it could be up to maybe 20 minutes or so out. But then some of the actual events, some of the curves that we saw were almost only half an hour segments or so where it happens. So is there a way of just slightly predicting from the pattern, you know, what's going to happen to a particular band? Because they're very quick reacting, aren't they?
It's a good question. I mean, all it is a measurement. So it's how long the measurement takes to... I mean, when you look at, say, an equivalent would be looking at a rainfall app on your mobile phone. You know, the radar's going around and doing all the number crunching and calculating, and it goes into a computer, and then it gets plotted as an image onto a big chart, and then it gets sent out to the servers. It's never going to be exactly the instant. There'll always be a processing distribution delay. With these things, it's usually about 10 minutes to 20 minutes or so. And it varies depending on what's going on with the server as to how quickly it comes back. But you don't have to wait very long. And the question is, when you look at the shapes of the graphs, for most of it, it's going to give you enough time to react to it. If you see something going, the spike will usually be 2 or 3 readings wide for a sporadic E spike, and for the F layer stuff, it's a lot longer lasting than that. So I would say, obviously, the quicker you get the data, the better. The predictive element, there are ionospheric physics people who do predictions of the ionosphere and produce these graphs, but this has been designed to reflect. There is quite often going to be a difference between a prediction system and an actual measurement. And it's important to realise that what affects the noise you hear in your receiver is the actual measurement of the ionosphere. It's the stuff that's actually happening that makes the radio signals do what they do that you hear, whereas predictions may or may not have happened. You know, the model might not have correctly represented that particular feature, so the prediction might be wrong. So I would always go for an actual if you can get it in, we have a phrase, near real time. So near real time is good enough.
So use Propquest Live if you can. Absolutely. No,
don't look
definitely at it the day before to work out what you might be doing tomorrow.
No, well, you can look at the averages tab on the left that I showed way back at the beginning stage, where you can look at what a given month was like or so on. You can use that as a prediction tool in the same way we look up the weather data. You know, the climate of East Anglia would give you a maximum temperature of, I don't know, 21 Celsius in July. So you could plan for a warm day in July, and you wouldn't do the warm day barbecue in the garden thing in January. So you can use these averages graphs to come up with what would be a reasonable time to have a net. So in that sense, you can predict with it. But because the ionosphere we saw on that day, where we did a compare, where you could see the difference from one day to the next, phenomenal difference, because of effects on the sun, flares and everything else, there'd be very little point in building too much onto it. You've got to really go with the actual measurements, I guess.
Well, Jim, it has been a fascinating look again at Propquest. There's so much to it, and I know you've done a lot to it, and as you said, you're still doing continuing developments. Tony M0TDK says, thank you, Jim, excellent explanations and a very interesting subject, and we echo that as well. We're very, very fortunate to have you, not just as a presenter on this, but as a friend and as you know, a member of our club. And we're really grateful for what you've done, not just for our club, but actually for the whole of the amateur community with Propquest, you and Dan in particular. So thank you very much indeed for that, and thank you very much indeed for tonight's presentation.
It's a pleasure. Nice to be here, and thanks for listening. And any questions, buttonhole me at the club.
Will do. Thank you very much, Jim. There we are, Jim, G3YLA with Propquest, what it's all about. And I've looked at it a couple of times and not been able to work it out. I feel a little bit more confident now, so I think I'm going to try and go on there in the next couple of days and see if I can work out, you know, what it means, and maybe you'd like to do the same. But thanks again to Jim, G3YLA. That's almost it for NARC Live this week. Just to run through what's happening again at the club this week. Saturday, we've got the Koblenz Sked at 10 o'clock on 7.123 megs. Sunday at 7 p.m. we've got the GB2RS News on GB3MB. On Monday, the Monday Night Net, also on GB3MB. And at 8 o'clock on Monday, the 80 metre CW Net on 3.543 megahertz. Plus all those other activities that the club's going to be doing over the next weeks and months. As always, look at the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club website for more details. And don't forget to keep in touch with your stories, your news, your pictures, your spring pictures and everything else lovely. And don't forget the card as well. But thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you again on NARC Live online in 2 weeks' time. Or otherwise, hopefully, see many of you at the club next Wednesday night. And by the way, just before we go, I have got a comment there from Malcolm G3PDH about that Caister picture. He says, interesting picture from Merv, presumably the original Marconi mast, and the reason we do IMD from Caister. It was for communicating with the lightships offshore. So it looks like, Merv, that was an original picture of that original mast, and the whole, as Malcolm says, the whole point that we do it from there. Once again, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you very soon. From Tammy M0TC,
Bye-bye.
and from me, David G7ERP. Good night.